Hello everybody, this is Greg Helbeck and welcome to this week's REI Deal Breakdown. And today I'm going to talk about a property that I ended up losing money on in Salisbury Mills, New York. So if you are interested in learning what not to do when it comes to real estate investing, this is going to be the podcast / YouTube video to listen to. So I'm going to talk about a property I lost money on, and I'm going to give you the whole entire enchilada, as they say, so you can take lessons from this and hopefully not do it in your business. So the address is 58 Ores Mills Road in Salisbury Mills, New York. I forget the zip code. And by the way, before I get into that, if you're not familiar with me, I've been a full-time real estate investor for 8 years now. I've done well over 150 properties. I've made millions of dollars. And the goal of this channel and podcast is to just share the lessons that I've learned with you. So whether you're new or whether you are established, you can take these lessons and grow. So 58 Ores Mills Road. So this was actually not a single family house. This was a mixed use commercial building. So this was 4 units, 1 storefront, 3 apartments, and it was a very old building in a pretty bad location, not from a crime standpoint, but from like an actual where the building was. It was in no man's land. If you're familiar with the Hudson Valley, Salisbury Mills is kind of like in between New Windsor and Washingtonville and Blooming Grove. And this building is like right at an intersection where you could go to New Windsor one way, you can go to Washingtonville the other way, and if you go down the road, you're in Blooming Grove. So kind of in purgatory, and it's on a busy road too. It was actually it was at an intersection of 2 busy roads, right? So it's like super freaking busy there. So I got this lead from cold calling. So I literally went on PropStream and I pulled a list of commercial building owners who've owned their property for a while, and I personally cold called them, and I ran into a seller. His name was Bill. And he wanted to sell this building he owned, and it was completely vacant. And that was the first red flag I should have paid more attention to. It was vacant, and he had this property, and it was pretty old, and he wanted to sell it, and he was an older guy. And I was like, all right, well, come out and look at it. So I remember I went out there and looked at the property, and I was going to offer him like 300 or something like that. And I remember he gave me a price of 265. So he wanted to sell the property for less than what I was originally going to pay, because I knew it was worth like 450. I was like, all right, I'll do 265. And I ended up getting into contract just like a regular deal. And I needed to find a way to get the money for that deal. So, because I've never done a deal like that. At that point, up until that point, I've done like duplexes, houses, and condos and townhouses. That's it. This was my first commercial deal. And my plan on this property was to get short-term financing, like through hard money, and then refinance the property with a regular bank after I had everything rented out, and then keep it as a rental. That was the plan. And I went out and I took me a couple hard money lenders to get the deal, because a lot of them didn't want to do the mixed use thing. What I found, the company I did it with was called Lending One out of Florida. I think they were in Boca Raton, Florida. And they gave me, I think, 90%. My memory serves me right. I got to go look at the closing statement. But they gave me 90%. They gave me a 12-month loan. So I borrowed the money for up to 12 months. I paid it back sooner. But I remember I had the hard money and I was ready to go, and I closed on the property, and there's no tenants in there. There's no income. It's a complete vacant building. Needed some work, so I needed to do work on the apartments first to get them leased up. And then after that, I was actually planning to just lease out the storefront as is, which was a foolish plan. And then I was going to renovate the apartments, and then I was going to just rent them out and have it be easy, as they say. So started rehabbing the apartments. The studio, we really didn't need to do much. And then the two bedroom units, I had to do one of them I had to not gut, but almost gut. Then the other unit I had to do updates on. But they were big apartments. They were pretty cool. Both apartments had 2 floors in each apartment, so they were pretty spacious. And the studio was tiny, and then the storefront was like a decent sized storefront. So the plan was, as we were renovating the apartments to get leased up, I wanted to get a tenant for this commercial space, because I knew in my head, if I couldn't get a renter or a tenant, same thing in this case, for that commercial storefront, this place would have been a glorified triplex. And it would have been a bad deal at that point, right? So I remember I hired a broker, commercial leasing broker, and I said, hey, can you get me a tenant for this unit? And he was like, okay, I can certainly do that. So I remember we put it up for rent for I think $1,100 a month and absolutely nothing. And then we dropped the price down to $1,000 a month, and there was basically no interest in this thing. It was pretty dated inside. The kitchen was dated, in the back of the store. The carpets were dated. It was a dated storefront, but a tenant can kind of make it whatever they want, so I thought. So after like a month and a half of no tenants wanting this store, I realized that it was going to be challenging to get this thing rented out. And if I couldn't get a commercial tenant, this building would have really not made any sense to do. So after a month and a half, I decided to get rid of the leasing broker. He understood. And I said, I got to go in a different direction with this property. And then I hired a residential broker to then try to sell the building vacant without any tenants for a really high price because I was greedy. And we put it on the market. Nobody wanted it. I don't even think we had any offers on it. And I was kind of like, ooh, this is not good. I tried to lease the storefront out, no demand. I tried to sell the building at that point, no offers. So my broker, Edwin, was like, why don't we do this? Let's take this off the market. Let's fill it up with tenants. Once we have some income coming in from the property, we'll put it back on the market and try to sell it as a cash flowing asset. So I said, that sounds like a good plan. So I moved a tenant into the studio apartment. I moved a tenant into the first 2-bedroom unit, and then I moved a tenant into the 2nd-bedroom unit. So now at this point, I had a 3-unit property with a 4th unit vacant, and we put it back on the market to sell. And we actually had an offer right away. I think we had an offer all cash. I think it might have been either at our asking price or 50 grand above our asking price, all cash. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. I'm going to definitely take that offer. And even with that offer, I was not going to make money on the property. I knew that going in. The rehab was more than I thought, and the numbers didn't make a lot of sense. But anyway, so we go into contract with this buyer, and all of a sudden, I'm thinking we're selling this property and it's going to be smooth sailing to the finish line. And I got a call from a tenant, and they said they were sick. And I was like, hey, sorry to hear you're sick. Like, that sucks. She moved from Colorado to New York, and she probably wasn't used to the wet weather. And I said, I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a landlord, and I hope you get better soon. So she called me again a couple days later and said, I think I'm sick because of the building. And then the first thing I'm thinking of in my head is like, oh shit, like if she's sick because of the building and she sues me and I get into a lawsuit, I can't sell this property, and then that's a problem. So I had her get a mold test kit. There was no mold. And then she still wasn't sold on that. And then while that's happening, the other tenant got sick too in the studio apartment. And I was like, oh shit, now 2 tenants are sick. There might be a problem with this property. And meanwhile, I'm in contract to sell it. So I want to get this thing off my hands because it was a bad deal. So I end up getting a professional mold testing company to like test the air. And there was no mold in the property. So she was all pissed off, and I said, listen, like, I'll just give you your security deposit and your rent back, and you can just move out. She's like, cool, I'll do that. So she moved out. The other tenant ended up getting better, and then she stayed. And then I had another tenant move in upstairs into the other unit at this time, and they seemed like they were pretty cool. And now I'm in contract to sell this thing, and we're just waiting to close. And now we're like getting into like December. I think it was December 2021, and that tenant got sick. And I'm like, wow, why do all these tenants keep getting sick in this property? There's got to be something wrong here. Like, there's no way. Like, it's not a coincidence they're all getting sick. Like, there's something wrong with the building. It's not mold. Turns out, long story short, the tenant who I moved in last ended up looking around the attic, and they found a bag of cat feces in the attic, I swear. It was filled with cat feces. I thought that was what was getting them sick. They were pissed off. I discounted half their rent the following month, which is totally understandable. They decided to stay, which was good, and thought we were good to go. So now I got 2 tenants, 2 empty units, in contract to sell it. So I'm thinking we're good. And then all of a sudden, like a week and a half later, and I remember the tenant was sick again. They were like, why do we keep getting sick? And I'm like, I have no idea. So what I ended up doing was I hired somebody who comes there in a hazmat suit to like pump out the air in this building. Long story short, what ended up happening was the septic system had like something wrong with the pipe, and it was causing the septic to basically leak up into the vent and contaminate the property with a terrible odor, which then got the tenant sick. It was nothing harmful, but it just didn't smell good, and then they got sick from that. So that was like a $300 fix or something like that. And then the building was good to go at that point, and then I sold it and lost money. I think I lost about 10 grand. It was all said and done. So what are some lessons you can learn on this deal? You got to play in your sandbox, right? I'm a single family condo duplex kind of guy, right, at this point. I thought I was smart and I was going to be a commercial investor. And what I should have done is I should have partnered with somebody who knew what they were doing to do this deal. Lesson number 2, don't buy vacant buildings if you're just getting into commercial real estate, right? Like if you buy a building that's already making money, if the property goes wrong, at least you're making some money. Like I bought a property that was producing 0 income. And even when it had renters in it, like it wasn't really cash flowing because by the time I paid the taxes and the hard money loan, like it didn't make anything. So don't buy vacant buildings if you're brand new. If you have experience and you know what you're doing and you're really good at value add, 100%, yeah, you could do that if you know what you're doing. But if you're brand new, don't do that, right? That's a stupid idea. And I paid the price to learn that lesson. So hopefully you learn this lesson for free. And I had a criteria I set when I first wanted to do this, and it was like, don't buy vacant buildings. And I broke my rule because of this price. And then lesson number 3, if you're buying commercial real estate, when I say commercial, I'm talking like a store, an office, an industrial building, etc. You got to know the local market for that certain niche, right? Like I didn't really do any research on the residential. I maybe did like 10 minutes worth of research. I'm like, oh yeah, there's a couple of places for rent around here. but I didn't do any homework. Like the demand for retail in that area was basically zero. And there's a reason it was sitting vacant. I think the last tenant that was in there was like 3 years ago, and it's been vacant ever since. So like you got to buy commercial in an area like a downtown area or an area where there's foot traffic. There was no foot traffic around here. Like it was all cars on a busy road. So you got to know the demand of commercial real estate. Hopefully you got some value from this. If you're interested in partnering with me and you don't have a mixed use building and you have a single family house or a condo or a duplex, whether you want to partner with me, AKA wholesale me a house, or if you're a wholesaler and you want to wholesale a house together and you're in Reno, San Diego, the Hudson Valley, or Delaware, send me an email, greg@velocityhousebuyers.com, or Instagram direct message me at grego_37. I'd love to do a deal with you, and I will catch you on our next REI Deal Breakdown. Take care.